Oh, welcome everybody. Today is August the 13th, 2020, and this is EA Zoom meetings. And today we're going to talk about spectrum consciousness and the Leo archetype. My name is Cameron Allen, and I just want to talk about all the different variations in the ways that we can see the different zodiac signs. So I've just been unpacking this in so many different ways. And since I've begun talking to more astrologers too as well, I just see that every single archetype is just, I'm going to say endless. I'm going to say endless. There's just so many different varieties and forms in ways that the archetypes can become alive in our reality. So these are just talking about the spectrum that the Leo archetype is. So with the spectrum of consciousness as well in general, just as a framework, I'm always trying to open up the lens, right? It's like on one side, and this is something that I've seen with Leo energy working just like in a shop where I was like learning astrology through people, through like direct experience and interactions. Like on one hand, you like would have a Leo who's like very like the lion's roar and just like a large mane and chest up and just so prideful, and not necessarily saying it's a negative pride. It could be sometimes, but then on the other side, you would have like a little kitten Leo, right? And just like understanding that spectrum so we can open it up, because especially the more and more astrology gets mainstream, people tend to pigeonhole the archetypes, which is totally fine for beginning to understand them, but always understanding that we come back to that spectrum awareness, right? So I just thought these pictures were just really embodying the Leo archetype, right? Like this one right here is just someone holding the sun, right? Super, super simple. And then here, kids playing, right? So Leo a lot of times being about, I think about creativity, right? And I even do think of children, and it definitely has a lot to do with play. And then obviously the lion here. So here we are talking about the energetic architecture of the Leo archetype. So for every single astrology sign, you're going to have a polarity or a duality. And in this case, the Leo archetype is yang, or you can say the masculine principle, or you could say energy moving out from the center, right? And then you see this reflected here, and this person has the yin and the yang in his hands, and this would be the yang energy, right? It's an up and out energy. And then we have the fire element. So we have polarity or duality, and then we have an element, which is fire. And fire tends to give people like a special sense of destiny and purpose. It also is the energy that stimulates things, because remembering that we're talking about a spectrum here. So we're not just talking about people and what it does in their psychological soul development complex, but also speaking on what it does in the human body. So when we have fire, it stimulates things, right? It excites things. It's transformative. And then we have the mode, which is the fixed mode. And fixed is a consolidating energy. It structures things. Even if you think about it from the perspective of cardinal, fixed, and mutable, which are the three modes, cardinal activates, fixed sustains, and then the mutable is changeable. And then it's ruled by the sun, right? So we have a picture here of the sun, just that illuminating quality, right? And also that thing to look towards, which within our reality as humans, it would be our purpose in the sky, in our solar system. It's the sun, right? It's the thing it's the centralizing force. It's the centralizing force. So we're going to go into the anatomy and physiology of Leo. So here, the first thing I think about when I think of Leo, I think about the spine, right? And I love this quote here. I was doing meditations and I kept hearing this a few months ago. And it was just like, the spine is the main line to the divine. The spine is the main line to the divine. So since I've been hearing that in my meditations, I just thought it was so important to like bring a highlighted emphasis to that in the Leo archetype, because I feel as though when we're talking about Leo, everyone talks about the heart, and that's not incorrect at all. That's totally right. But missing out on the spine would do us all a major, major, major disjustice. Yeah. It just wouldn't just do us justice if we didn't highlight the spine, because the spine is connected to pretty much every organ system in the body. So here we're just talking about deconditioning the spine and just being mindful of what happens in our society when we're in opposite. Well, so I even look at this as the opposition to Aquarius, right? Our spine, Leo, and it's like in opposition, or it's like something coming up against the health or the quality of our spine. And what is it? Technology. So just being mindful, even if you are on your cell phone, being mindful to keep it at as much eye level as you can, right? Because the more and the more and the more and the more and the more that you drop your neck, you don't allow the energy or that radiance that the sun energy or the Leo energy can be to flow through you. And when our spine gets out of whack, then it's going to lead to everything else getting out of whack. And it's just really, really, really that simple. So I just think that's really, really important reflection there. And also just being mindful that you can always like do extra bends backwards if you catch yourself being forward on your phone. I mean, I know people now, sometimes they're like making it, actually it's like becoming like a real issue for people when they're trying to stop being on their phone and they're like judging themselves, and that's just not helpful. So I always am trying to decondition judgment. So also on a more esoteric level, the spine, like I was saying before, it's connected to all the organs in the body, right? But then also in different traditions, they have like different wording for the spine, or they have different reflections of it that just mean things on a deeper level. And I'm not going to necessarily talk about all those levels right now, but I just wanted to invite people and present this information to them to see what they and do what they will with it, right? So first we have Jacob's ladder, which is 33 stairs, right? There's 33 vertebrae in the spine. So there's 33 is just such a big number. It's a master number. And yeah, so I just look at it as like a stairway to heaven, quote unquote, metaphorically speaking, maybe actually in a practical way speaking too as well, right? Like I don't want to go too far esoteric and be like, this is how you make it to heaven. Just make sure you activate your spine. But I don't know if that's not true. So I'm always keeping the spectrum open so I can find more understanding in my life and in reality. So the Sushumna Nadi is also corresponding directly to the spine. And it's not necessarily the spine, but it's as if it's like the energy, right? The divine energy that's moving up the spine, right? And that's going to be the central channel, right? There's going to be a central channel. The spine would correspond to the central channel. When it comes to the sun, it's actually going to correspond to what's called Pingala, but I'm not going to go there. Sushumna, just open invitation for everybody to look that up. And then also thinking about in Eastern practices as well, there's different parts in the body that they're called the Dantian. So the Dantian is just like essentially like large energy centers to reduce it down. I'm being reductive right now for sure, but just reflections and open invitations. So also when it comes to the sun and the moon and Saturn, this is something that I think about a lot too. So with the Leo energy, it is about how much energy or force that we have in our spine, right? How much energy or force do we have in our spine? With the moon energy, right, even though it's necessarily on the spine, think of this as like, how is the energy moving up and down the spine? Is it fluid? How does it feel? How does it feel if you just flex your back and then come forward? How does that feel? Does that feel fluid in your body, right? And then Saturn would be, like you see here, these like little circles or whatever, but it's like, how much space does it have, right? How much space does it have? Or what's the structure of your spine in comparison to how much vital force it has, which would be the sun, and then how much flow that it has, which would be the moon. So in understanding that Saturn can create restriction and limitation, right? No matter how much vital force you have, if Saturn's constricting down on it, it's not going to flow, which would cause blockages in the body. And the way that we experience blockages in the body just on a basic level is just pain or restriction and limitation in movement. So that's something to think about. And here is a great way to move the spine, right? It's super simple. You just literally just put your nose on the wall, put your chin on the wall, put your chest on the wall, put your stomach on the wall, put your pelvis on the wall. You don't necessarily have to put your thighs on the wall, but I do that just to be extra dramatic And then by the time you get there, your nose will be back here. And then you go forward again. So it's like nose, chin, chest, stomach, pelvis, thighs. See? And I'm back. Now I go forward. And then you just do that every day, every single day. And you increase the fluidity, maybe even go to the left, maybe go to the right, and just bring in that kind of playful energy to it. And just be mindful if you have limitations, just back off. With this exercise, I find it to be so helpful because so many people can do it wherever they're at. Even if it was just like doing it like this and you didn't use the wall, even if you just check in with your body right now and do it while you're listening, you can lift your nose and then your chin and then your chest and then your stomach and then your pelvis and then your thighs and then do it again, right? You just create that wave. So Leo does actually correspond to the heart and the cardiovascular system as well. So the heart, it pumps the blood and it moves the fire, right? The fixed fire, which is the heart. And also being mindful that Leo energy can tend towards having too much energy in the heart, which is fixed, right? So it's like fixed fire in the heart. What does that look like? Heart palpitations, right? It's like too much excitement. There's too much going on there. It's too stimulated. So being mindful of that, and motherwort is a great plant for that if you ever want to tune in. And also being mindful, because sometimes we think about our mind. We think about our mind and then we put it in the brain, right? We put it in the brain. But we have to be mindful that there's nerve plexuses in different parts of the body. And the heart has 40,000 neurons to our current understanding. Now, that's just our current understanding. There's, this is kind of newer, and it might not be that new, but it's new that we're talking about it, how many neurons the heart actually has. So it's just important to be mindful that the mind in and of itself does not exist in the brain, but it actually exists in like the all-pervasive field and everywhere in the body, if you think about it. And it rules the eyes, and like Leo rules the eyes, which the heart and how it pumps the blood is getting it to that area. Even if you like see this right here, like the blood's going to get up to the eyes, and that shows how much radiance we have, and also show like the illuminating quality of Leo, right? Like in the sun, it like illuminates things. So based off how our heart is pumping will also correspond to how we are seeing things clearly or not. And also just being mindful, and this is not necessarily astrology, but being mindful that cardio is not just running. There's so many other ways that you can do cardio, even thinking about how Leo is a fixed fire. And if someone has too much fire and they have excitation in their heart space, maybe the cardio you want to do isn't like high intensity training. And maybe you want to use a remedy that is like swimming. Maybe you want to swim instead, right? Because it's water. It's going to tend towards being more cooling. It's going to be more fluid. It's not going to be as fixed, have as much of a fixed energy. So just being mindful that if you do tend towards having that fixed fire or a lot of fire in your chart or a lot of fire energy, that you can still do cardiovascular things and get the fire moving without getting it pumping excessively. Yeah. So what to watch for? So what to watch for in the Leo archetype? So high blood pressure is the first thing to look for. And these are just some numbers here on it. Be mindful. I'm not giving any medical advice today, and everyone should go see their primary health care physician and whoever else they consult. These are just invitations for perspective. So just got to get that out the way. So high blood pressure, this is just being mindful of how high it is. And from my lens and what I've been taught, I was taught to look at so when you're looking at the blood pressure, they say, I've been taught that it's not actually the heart that you're looking at. You're looking at how the heart is responding to other things. So the upper number, the number on the top, right, the systolic, it's as if you're reading the adrenal glands. And on the bottom, the diastolic, it's like you're reading the kidneys. So essentially what they're saying here is that the top number is the adrenals, the bottom number is the kidneys, and it's how your heart is responding to those things. It's how your heart is responding to those things. So that's something to look into. So also upper back tension, just thinking about the fixed energy. If you have too much stimulation here, it can create tension and tightness in the back. spinal issues that I talked about, and then excess heat and inflammation as well. Anytime you have any fire sign, more inflammation could be highlighted there, or even just like a redder complexion in the skin is going to indicate fire. Also, if you press down on your pulse, you also can feel your pulse is just like excessively stimulated when it comes to the fire element and when it goes out of balance. So I want to talk about the vital force, which can be seen as a lot of different things. There was a French philosopher who calls it the élan vital, which is like the impulse of life. It's the animating force, right? It's like the actual vital force that's moving through everything, right? And it's what we perceive as energy. And it's the creative principle held that, emanates in all organisms. Yeah, so it's just the energy that gives us the life force, the energy that moves around in our body in and of itself, which you can see that as the sun as well. So here I want to talk about the quality that's called Shen, when it comes to Leo and Shen. So essentially when people talk about the Leo energy and radiance, this is how I perceive it. Shen is a part of the three treasures, which I'm not going to talk about Jing and Qi right now, but Shen is like the light that you give off, the radiance that you have. And I even put this picture here because in meditation, one is consolidating the fire and like getting the fire to move in a certain type of way so that it can be sustainable and shine, right? And shine. And that shine is not just so we can be seen, but so that we can help other people nourish, right? So also something to talk about is agni. And this is from the Ayurvedic tradition. And agni in the sun is about digesting physical matter into more subtle forms. It's what the body needs to have vitality. And it generates warmth in the body, in the whole being, and in the cells. It's actually like the mitochondrial functioning within the human cells, right? So it's like I have a vital force, I have energy, I have radiance, and so does my cells. And so does the sun in the solar system. And so does something somewhere else, right? So it's like that macrocosm and the microcosm and how they just continuously have this archetype radiating out and then radiating in. And also having strong agni or this like fixed fire, it also produces a clear mind and like radiance, and it allows us to like also like the illuminating quality of the sun. So Leo in alchemy, it's considered the digestion process, which is the alchemical process in which gentle heat is applied for an extended period of time in order to create modification of a substance. So I'm not going to really go into that, but it was just an invitation for everybody to look at that reflection because we are talking about the spectrum. So there's so many different varieties of ways to look at the Leo archetype. And I just want to talk about a plant that I really have loved working with over the years that's just helped so many people when it comes to like the cardiovascular system. And it's called red sage root is what I call it, but in traditional Chinese medicine they call it Dan Shen. And it supports the heart and the vascular health, promotes blood circulation, supports microcirculation. So just to differentiate the two, so blood circulation is more of like an overall like the blood that flows. You can even see it as like you see these big red roots right here, and that would be like circulation, but then these like little things that are coming off of it would be microcirculation. So like the veins here, like where the blood is flowing in your hands, where you see the little veins, it's just like more distinct, the microcirculation. And it helps support the immune function, helps ease menstrual issues, which with the fixed signs, I see a lot of times that menstrual issues can tend to be an issue because things get stagnant when you talk about fixed energy. And it cools heat in the heart, and it aids in removing cysts and stagnation. So Leo in the tarot. So with the Leo archetype, we have the Strength card, and that represents courage and influence. And then on the reverse, it represents like self-doubt and like low vital force, and even like not being potent, not having that strong will. Which also corresponds, strength also corresponds to like willpower as well. The Five of Wands would be conflict and tension. And then in reverse, it's like inner conflict and like the need to release tension. The Six of Wands, which would be like praise, moving forward with things, having adoration. This more feels like the kingly energy that Leo brings to us at times. And then in reverse, this like failure, it's like a wound to the ego. And then I put right here, gloat before nope. So that's just like the pride before the fall, right? The pride before the fall. When this is in reverse, because like if you get adoration and you reach this level of achievement and you become excessively big-headed or have too much pride, then yeah. But when you gloat, reality on some level usually tells you nope, like go back and humble yourself, which would be the next zodiac sign, which is Virgo, right? And then the Seven of Wands, standing up for yourself to be seen. And it's kind of forceful. It's like putting itself out there, right? It definitely has like a more Martian quality to it. So I'll even think of this as like Mars and Leo, right? And you need to stand up for yourself and be seen when you feel like you're under attack, right? And in the reverse, it could just be like folding in on yourself when in a situation, or burning out and collapsing and like giving into compromise. When here in Leo, we have that fixed fire for a reason. We have a purpose. So we don't want to use that purpose in a way that burns us out, right? And we don't want to compromise on what our purpose is. So now I'm going to talk about a crystal that corresponds to the Leo energy, which is the star ruby, and also the regular ruby. But I like the star ruby, and I've worked with it a lot in the past few years. So I just want to tune everybody into the star ruby. So it's used for increasing magnificence and abundance, right? Which is definitely a strong like Leo royalty sun quality to it. And the star ruby is said to have similar properties as ruby, but it's just like on some level, it's like on a soul level, right? So it's like the ruby, which does so many amazing things to begin with. But then it takes it into a more subtle level, right? Which is the reason why it has a star on it, so to speak. And it's said to increase emotions and radiate more as well. So the sun illuminates things. So no matter what happens when you're working with star ruby, it does tend, well, in my experience, it tends to increase those emotions. So it's illuminating how we feel, right? So it's going to amplify that. It's going to be seen by us, and it's going to be seen by others because it just increases the emotion. So now we're going to get into more like psychological things when it comes to Leo. So the first thing I want to talk about is narcissism, which is a big topic in our society these days. And on some level, I feel like our society actually promotes it sometimes, but we'll talk about the spectrum that actually exists within narcissism. So first I want to talk about things that actually can be the fundamental basis of narcissism. So at Aries, we have birth, and we have a need for self-discovery, right? And then at Taurus, we have self-consistency, right? A consolidating energy. And in here with the Taurus archetype, we also have what's called object constancy. Object constancy. It's like, do you feel safe enough to take a few steps over there without your mother being right next to you, right? It's like, do you feel that consistent inside of yourself to just be by yourself? Not necessarily by yourself, like abandoned necessarily, so to speak, but just to go even play on the playground. Like, do you feel self-consistent enough to do that, right? And thinking about it, if someone didn't have that reflected to them, or like doesn't obtain that in the youth, then that can be actually the origins of narcissism in and of itself. So I'm not saying that we should necessarily give people who have narcissistic tendencies a break or anything like that. But I just invite people to go back to the origins of it and know when someone has these qualities, something was going on when they were younger that made it this way. I always seek understanding. So I just think it's really, really, really important for us to understand things like that. And also if we just aren't held enough and we don't, like this mother here, like she's looking at this baby and he can feel his purpose, or like he has his radiance, right? Just even thinking about Leo and that energy of like wanting to be seen, right? Want to be seen or to have attention. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So with Gemini, we're engaging in reality, right? So if we don't feel self-consistent, we probably won't even make it to engaging in reality and gathering information and experiences and data. So if we don't do that, then we don't feel, we're going back to the self-consistency. So we don't feel self-consistent, and there's a sense of not feeling value inside of ourselves. So when we come to Cancer, right, and we try to create a self-image, if we don't feel safe and secure, and sometimes that can create narcissistic tendencies. Like we have to create a self-image for ourselves that is really like a protective layer, right, to try to inflate ourselves at Leo. Right? It's like my self-image does not feel self-consistent, the square to Taurus with Leo. So now I'm going to compensate and try to feel emotionally secure by being on some level pompous or narcissistic. So yeah. And also that is, if someone tends towards being narcissistic, if they can learn this framework of thinking, it doesn't have to be astrology. If they learn this framework, if they learn that they didn't have object constancy or self-consistency in the youth, then they can actually handle what's occurring in their life. And they don't necessarily have to have that narcissism, right? I mean, if it's narcissistic personality disorder, I'm not even going to speak on that because that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people leaning towards narcissism in general. I'm not going to talk about personality disorder because that's not my thing, and I'm not here for that. But just understanding this functioning, right, it's just so helpful. It's just so helpful. And I've reflected with so many people and just open invitation, just let that sink in and allow ourselves to process that. So here, I'm also going to talk about narcissism and how it is reflected in the archetypes of Leo, Virgo, and Libra, right? So the self-image, if it wasn't nourished or it didn't feel safe, right, then here it could be like excessively feeling like it's on top, or they say it's at the top of the pyramid, right? It's like the Leo king. He's just like at the top of the pyramid, and he's just like, I'm the greatest, right? Self-aggrandizement. It's like inflated ego. So that's a form of narcissism, right? But then also there's a form of narcissism that lives in the Virgo archetype that is less often talked about, right? So here in Leo, it's all about me because I'm the greatest. You should bow. And then here in Virgo, it's all about them because everything happens to them, right? It could even be like a sense of, I guess you could say it's simply like it could be like a victim mentality. You're feeling not good enough or always feeling underneath things, right? So those are two forms of narcissism that exist. And I feel as though in our society, we definitely focus on the Leo form of it, and we don't focus or call in people who have the more Virgo archetype energy of it. So not to judge either one of them, because judgment from my lens is just not my thing, honestly, but just as a reflection, right? But then here in Libra, right, we're balancing, right? It's a balancing act. We're creating harmony. Yeah, I'm really great, but I also am not great at some things, right? Or like if I analyze it, there's some things I could work on still, and that would create this balance and this harmony at Libra. And even I just love this picture so much. It's just even like sometimes it's a difficult balance. Sometimes it's a difficult balance. So just being mindful when you go into this form of energy, even if it's not excessively narcissistic, just understanding that energetic force in this one as well, really important, right? To find that balance and harmony. So I want to talk about Leo parents, right? Which is, with the Leo energy, we talk about creativity. So it's creating children in their own image, right? It's like, I created you. So they're trying to create their reality through their children, right? Which can hinder their children's development, right? They can't have a sense of self when the parent is consistently projecting onto them what they want to create inside themselves. And just because they created the child, because they did create the child, but now they want the child to create what they wanted to create inside of themselves. Yeah, if that's not too much to say. And it also can be a prelude to narcissism as well, right? If my parents had narcissism, it could make me feel like I'm underneath them, and it can make me feel like I've been victimized or been put down in that way. Or it could just be like I can model that and I can start making everything about me. But also on some level, when someone has a parent that could be narcissistic, there is a sense of needing to be able to be more centered in themselves. Like that is important, right? So that's something to be mindful of. If I had narcissistic parents, there is a sense of myself that I do need to like boost up, but just in the right amounts, right? Not too much, not too little, right? That spectrum of like the difference between having so much humility that you just like are underneath everything, and then being so prideful that it's just too much, and like in the middle, in that sweet spot of like well-informed narcissism is what some people call it. And this is reflect a lot in like parents who want their children to perform, like if they want them to be artists or they want them to do sports, right? Which also can lead to people being seen but not being seen. So I'm going to talk about that soon too here. And it also corresponds to solar inner child, which is just like the creativeness inside of ourselves as children or as adults, right? The creativity that we have that we want to be seen. Like looking in somebody's eyes and just seeing that like light in their eyes. Like the way I experience it, actually, it's like as if everything in reality wants to be seen. I was talking to some friends this morning, actually, and I was talking about that. It's like even plants, right? Even plants, and talking about Leo season, right? When Leo season in the northern hemisphere, where I'm at least, in the summertime, it's like when all the flowers are blossoming, right? That's their version of wanting to be seen, right? Something about recognition in this reality that feels like very fundamental. Like everything is seeking to be recognized and be seen. So yeah, just some interesting reflections. So this is that light in a child's eye here that I speak of. He's just like, oh, they see me, right? How does that feel when somebody sees you? And then here is just like the joy and pure pleasure and play of being a child and just creating whatever, right? Back in the day, you give me 2 sticks and some sand, and I create a whole new world, a whole new reality. And that's something that I feel like we leave behind when we become adults, which we'll talk about that later too with the in conjunction to Capricorn. So attention versus being seen. This is something to think about because they're 2 totally different things from my perspective. 2 totally different things. But they can be viewed as the same thing, right? So attention from my perspective is fleeting. So it's like if I go out in public and I sing and I perform and I get attention, right? But then I go home and nobody's there, right? That attention is fleeting, right? And then also attention-seeking behaviors can create burdens. So if I'm seeking attention all the time, a lot of times that could be something that I have to like hold up, and that can get really burdensome, right? Especially if I'm being excessively dramatic, then I'll have to go out there and be dramatic all the time if this is how I'm showing people that I am, just to get attention. And that can leave us empty as well, because even if I do access all this attention, but nobody really sees me, that actually creates more of an issue later on down the line. Yeah. Yeah, and attention just can be excessively externally oriented. And I'm not saying that it always is, and that's why I put can in large words, because like with everything I'm saying, it's always a spectrum, right? It's always a spectrum. And also something to be mindful of is, as children, we just need attention, right? We need that to create, self-consistency and all those other things. And then being seen is more sustainable. It's more penetrating, right? Being seen allows us to be exactly who we are, right? As we move through things. So if somebody's giving us attention, but then deep down inside, they're not really seeing us, I might act out in a certain way. And if they don't see me and just give me attention, they might not even know what's going on. Or like I was saying up here, with attention could be like more of a burden. But if somebody truly sees me, then when I'm doing things that might be getting me attention, right? When I'm doing things that might be getting me attention, but then later on I like break down or I have a ego wound or anything like that, then somebody can still be there with me through that, right? And it's just much more depth to being seen. Yeah, and it allows us to regulate and deepen in self-understanding. Because if we're not being seen, then we're always just trying to get attention. And when we're trying to get attention, we're not actually vibrating from the center within and then radiating out, right? It's like our energy is diffusive. So our vital force actually is lessened through that. In different systems, they call that leaking your energy, right? You're leaking your energy. So the energy you could be using for your special purpose and destiny is just being leaked out everywhere. And that can create the bottomless pit complex, they say, the bottomless pit, which is just a desire for endless recognition from, some compensatory internal experience. So it's like if we don't feel good enough, or we don't feel like, or if we don't see ourselves, then we're going to ask for people to endlessly see us. And oh my gosh, it's endless. It can be endless, right? It can be endless. And that's why sometimes the cliche of like Leos, they like need a certain amount of attention and validation so that they stay in relationships. And sometimes when they don't, then they could tend towards, being more flighty if they don't get that sense of recognition. It's like sometimes they just have a bottomless pit. It's just never ending. So it's something to be mindful of. Yeah, and it can never be satisfied from external factors. Self-consistency from within is the only way to sustain in a true way. Yeah. And then also with Leo, we have the royalty archetype, right? And something about the illuminating quality of the sun is that a leader can be seen, right? You can see a leader, right? And there's different types of leaders, right? So even with thinking about the Aries type of leader, that's like a leader that's paving the way towards new things. And people are just like seeing that person try something new or do something new, right? So they're leading the way. Well, here with Leo, it's like, from my perspective, it's like the person is the actual leader in and of itself. They're the embodiment, right? Right. They're the manifestation of the leader or royal archetype. And then with Sagittarius, it would be more of a thought, right? Leading through thoughts and ideas. Yeah. Like the heart pumps blood, royalty controls how nourished the lands are, right? And that's something to think about when we're thinking about royalty or people who are supposed to be leaders, right? Are they the centralizing force that's nourishing the whole body? Or are they so fixed in their own thing, in their own purpose, that actually everything else is getting depleted, right? So this is, when we think about the Leo energy and how it is in relationship with all of the fixed signs, So the opposition to Leo and how the royalty archetype is manifested through Leo, I look at it as it could be helping the collective, right? It's like I shine and I pump this blood so that we all can be fed. Or I create this fire so that we all can be warm. Or it could be like, this fire is mine, right? This fire is mine. Or this group of people that I'm around with Aquarius and elitism. Right? When we think about Aquarius, we think about the collective, but we also think about groups. And a lot of times I feel like people forget about the groups that can be like hoarding things, which would be like the more negative reflection of royalty or people in power. And then with the Taurus archetype, the square to Taurus, it's about providing resources in a more positive reflection. And on the negative reflection, it's about greed, right? If you think about that square, it's just like the square from Taurus to Leo. It's like if you don't feel emotionally secure in what you have, then you're going to try to hoard it, right? And then in Scorpio, it's about empowerment or disempowerment through sharing the resources, right? Through sharing the resources. And also here, when I think of the royalty archetype from the Leo perspective and that square to Scorpio, it could be about like kind of like this sense of maybe like paranoia where you're like in fear that someone's going to betray you because of jealousy and envy, which is a very strong Scorpio energy. And Kings had that back in the day, right? They totally had that. Like people were like plotting against them, and then they would have like spies come to try to get their goods, right? So shining as the sun, right? So shining our light so that others are nourished, super important. Well-informed self-centeredness, And you must sustain ourself to help self. And what I mean by that is like the lowercase s self is as if like me as Cameron, myself, is in context to the larger self, which would be like the ultimate reality or everything, right? The vibrancy that I have in me is utilized for the vibrancy that is everywhere else around me. And even thinking about the sun, if the sun is not centered in itself, then nothing else gets nourished, right? Or if it's not centered in itself, it like excessively emits this energy, and we can think of even like solar flares, right? And how that is actually damaging to other planetary bodies and energies outside of itself. So when it doesn't contain that energy in a cohesive manner or in an integrated way, it can cause harm to other people. And we have to be mindful of our purpose and our light and how we shine, and take the sun's leadership with that. So also with the Leo archetype, we have play and creativity and pleasure and sexuality. And this also goes with the fifth house a lot, the fifth house. So play is primal, right? There's a book out called Homo ludens, which just means the playful man. And it's talking about how play is actually like the basis for culture. Play is the actual basis for culture. And I recently listened to a talk Sabrina Monarch had, and she also says in her talk that play was also said to be like a basis for religion as well. So I thought that was interesting understanding and reflection. Also thinking about when we move away from play, when we get older, how we still play, but it just gets misrepresented and kind of not necessarily fully distorted. Not saying people who gamble or play sports are distorting play, but we have to be mindful that that still is play, right? Gambling and sports is play. It's a replacement for the play that we did when we were younger, but it's still play. So yeah, open invitation for people to understand that and bring that in more to their life, because it is primary. Even thinking about the Leo archetype is right after Cancer, right? It's right after Cancer. So we establish the self-image, and then if we feel secure enough, then we can play and we can explore what our purpose might be or what we want to create. And then Ido Portal here says play is bigger than humanity. It's bigger than humanity. So what he was saying there, from my understanding, was it's primal. It's primal. Animals played before humans made up, which I think is play too, but before we started doing all these things in reality, right? We played, right? As mammals and animals, it's just natural for us to play when we have that sense of safety though, right? And play and creativity. So someone says here, I forget who said it, but it's not like you become old because you play, you grow old because you stop playing, right? So being mindful of that, because I just feel like so many people get their play, like as much they don't play enough, right? We get rigid and we conform to the rigid structures of reality, and we just stop playing. And I also got this idea of creating worlds through play from Sabrina Monarch as well. And because I've actually talked to her a few times within the past few weeks, because I'm out here in Oakland. So she just has taught me a lot about that, right? And seeing how when I give myself the space to just play, right? Even sometimes we think of the Leo archetype as like somebody being an actor, being dramatic, right? Which being dramatic doesn't necessarily have to be like you want drama, right? That's two different things. Like being dramatic and having drama, those are two different things, even though they can be the same thing, right? So what I mean by being dramatic is maybe like more animated, or like really feeling into it, really trying to bring something alive, right? Really trying to illuminate a character or like play a role. And it creates a more aggrandizement of reality, right? So when I play this role of, even sometimes I feel like I play the role of an astrologer sometimes, right? It's like, I'm going to say this thing to somebody, and I'm going to say it with this much passion and drama so I can illuminate it and make it real for them, right? I want to create this ability for them to see something. Okay, so creativity and play is just really important. And also when we take a more playful approach to life in that way, it just makes things way more light, and we don't have to be yeah, so stuck and, stagnant in the heart space. And we need more of that. And performance and serious play. So here we just have the athlete, we have LeBron James, right? And he's just, right, this is performance, right? But it also is his purpose. He feels, I'm sure, I can't speak for him, but I would assume that this is his purpose, and he performs and he is playing, but he's serious, right? So there's this weird false dichotomy that when we're playing, we have to be like not doing anything productive, or we can't do it in a serious way, right? We can be very serious about play. And even in that way, we can actually create what we want in a faster manner, right? Whenever I find myself being excessively serious when I'm trying to work towards my purpose, it just is draining sometimes. And if I could just take it as like playing with the energy and trying to create it and being like, oh, like even when I think about when I used to play basketball, right? It's like I would shoot it and I would be like, oh, like I missed, like dang, like I'll just try again next time, right? That's that fixed fire, right? I feel this purpose. I want to score the basket, right? And then it's fixed. So it's like sustaining, and I'm just getting at it, and I'm getting at it until I create what I want to create. And also being mindful of not getting caught up in the drama of play, which this could be taken a lot of different ways, right? On a more broad, I guess, even spiritual level, I would say like getting caught up in the drama of play and knowing that when we're playing roles excessively, even thinking about, and this could be serious play, right? If I'm a kind-hearted person and all day I'm just like very calm and chill, but then when I go to work, I'm a manager. So I get caught up in the drama of playing that role, and then I get serious and I like hunker down on people and become rude, or even become excessively prideful, or not speak my truth. It depending on what it is that you have going on, it's going to be reflected differently in your reality. But it's just important not to get caught up in the drama of that play, right? And I say here, know when we're playing, know when we are playing to stop playing, right? It's like, all right, I'm just playing. Like I don't need to get caught up in this like animated sense of who I think I am, or performing to show somebody who I am, to like either get this sense of attention, right? This also can go back to attention and like recognizing ourselves. When we recognize ourselves, it's like, all right, like I don't even have to play like that. But I always tell people I talk to, I'm like, but just know when you're playing so that you can just play, right? You don't want to be playing and get so caught up in it that you don't even know that you're playing anymore. Don't play yourself, right? Just play. Yeah, so pleasure, sexuality, and as an evolutionary function, right? So the way that I look at it, and I've experienced it, is like actually the act of having sex and like feeling sensations of pleasure during that is like an evolutionary function, right? If I feel my self-image is safe and calm and in Cancer, when I go to Leo, then I can like actually create something after that. And creating I might be birthing a project that I'm working on, or it could be a child, right? So pleasure and sexuality, those two things are very interconnected, because also pleasure, sexuality, and creativity are also connected, right? Sexuality and creativity, to me, in my world, they're actually the same thing. They're actually the same thing. And then also even thinking about like play, right? We can say like foreplay, and then we have play here. And this, like when people are actors and they like get into that role of play, it's just so pleasurable, right? So just weaving all those things together and like how they might seem separate: pleasure, sexuality, creativity, play, right? All these things actually are this one archetype that is the spectrum of Leo, the fifth house energy. And then also here I have, pleasure and sexuality as like an evolutionary function when it comes to moving the energy in the spine, and like how that actually can create more pleasure in our body, and it can awaken our senses, right? And it also can open the space for more creativity to come through. And in that way, it would be seen as sexuality as like, I'm going to birth an idea. But also when it comes to like sexual activity, being able to move that spine and have the energy move, that divine move through that spine, yeah, it's just real. And then I want to talk about aversions to Leo. So when it comes to aversions with Leo, And aversions is a term in traditional astrology, which essentially just means like you can't see it, right? So Leo, the Leo energy, this is just a Leo rising chart for like right now in this moment, essentially. You can't, like Leo energy can't see this Cancer energy, and it can't see this Virgo energy, right? But it also can't see the Capricorn energy, and it also can't see the Pisces energy. So these right here are called inconjuncts, right? 150-degree aspect here. So the inconjunctions from the first house to the sixth house inconjunction. So what happens here in this inconjunction, right? We become conditioned Capricorn in our reality. And based off of that conditioning, there's a certain amount of like play that we can't access at times. And that's how I see it reflected in this reality. Like I said, it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum. So there's so many other manifestations that this can be, right? It's like if I have enough creativity and vital force, then I will have the energy to create structures in my day-to-day life to create what I want. But there's an aversion here, right? And then the aversion here from Leo to Pisces, the way I look at that is sometimes we can't see what is actually empowering us, which is like the ultimate truth, the supreme energy, right? The energy that is flowing through all things. That is actually the thing that is giving us this Leo energy. That's giving us this vital force, right? Consciousness itself, right? And with that consciousness, we're able to create things. So there's an aversion there, right? There's this thing that we can't see or in conjunction, which can create crisis, right? What do you want to create in your life, Leo? How is the world outside of you in the conditioning that you are in? How is that creating an issue, right? Where we need to make necessary adjustments? What crises are coming up for us? And also just here with the Pisces energy to Leo, it's like, where do we have illusions of grandeur? Honestly, it could be illusions of grandeur or delusions of grandeur. Here with the Leo archetype, that in conjunction, right? We feel the sense of empowerment, but then Pisces is going to dissolve that at some point in time, right? If it's not in alignment with ultimate truth. And then here with Cancer, right? How is our self-image in relationship to the way that we're expressing ourselves, our creative force, our the way that we're shining, right? Those two things are intimately connected, but also they miss each other sometimes. It's like we can't see it. How was the nurturing quality in your life, Cancer, leading to your expression of self, right? How much well-informed narcissism that you have or don't have. And also here it's like, in Leo, you might be on the top of the pyramid, but being able to see how that what's on the top of the pyramid needs to learn how to be of service and not necessarily put themselves on the bottom of the pyramid, but yeah, learning how to be of service in general, right? So all things that we have, that we create, the way that we shine, moving forward into the zodiac in Virgo, we need to learn how to be of service with that, right? So these are just some reflections of the Leo archetype. And there's so many more. And I actually outline a lot of that in a course that I have coming up, or actually it just open enrollment just began in it, the Health Secrets of the Zodiac, where I go through each zodiac sign and correspond things to the health. So it's going to go through the physical body, kind of like it did here, but it's a little different. And then it'll go over psychology, and it'll go over the spiritual aspects of it. So this is just like a way to look at archetypes through a spectrum, and how sometimes we just skim over each one and we talk about it just in like each detail, like in bullet point form. But each of these archetypes can be talked about from just the perspective of narcissism, and then that can be unpacked. And then talk about it from the perspective of creativity, and then that can be unpacked, and so on and so forth. So yeah, open invitation for everybody to go over it. And this is with the company Astrology Hub. So you can go to astrologyhub.com and find it there. You can go to my Instagram, which is CADream6, and find the link there. So just open invitation for everybody to tune into the Health Secrets of the Zodiac course. And thank you everybody for coming. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know.
Any questions from our audience?
I just had, I guess, a lot different thoughts. that things that you said, I have a triple Leo. Like I have Leo Sun,
Mm-hmm.
Leo Rising, and Leo North Node. So yeah, so I really appreciate what you brought to the conversation. Like I feel like I've read about Leo a lot, you know, in my lifetime, just because I have so much Leo. But yeah, mentioning the spine, you know, it seems like such a no-brainer right in front of us the whole time. But yeah, yeah, totally the spine, and almost how it's like the support system for the heart. You know, like it's the spine supports the rib cage, which protects the heart. So like how could we speak of the heart without speaking of the spine, you know?
Right, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
super important.
go ahead. I was just because I really appreciate the part about the parents too, talking about Leo parents or how a Leo child, you know, could be parented or.
Right, yeah. And the spine, yeah, it's just such an important thing. I mean, it's like the basis of health on some level for a lot of people that we just overlook. And I even had like meditations where it was like actually inviting me to talk more about the spine when it came to like the sun and Leo energy, because it like I was in the meditation and it took me above the human, right? It took me above a person, which was me most of the time, but it was other people at times too. And it's like that dot in the sun, in the symbol, the glyph of the sun, that dot was like me being above and looking down on that person or at that person. And like however that energy is moving through that spine, right? The rest of that glyph will either be big or small. So depending on how that dot, that energy is moving through that spine, will tend to show how much radiance that or how big the glyph of the sun will be, right? You have that big circle if the energy is moving up and down the spine correctly. But then the sun energy can actually be contracted and smaller if the spine doesn't have space. And that actually is what happens in the spine as well. When we have spinal issues, like that energy can't flow. So it gets like closed down and constricted on it. So I thought that was a interesting and unique reflection that came to me randomly or whatever is guiding me at times. Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. Appreciate that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. That brings us to the end of your meeting. And thank you from all of us. And we're looking forward to catching you next time. And good luck with your course.
Thank you. Appreciate you as always, Linda.